Welcome to another episode of Storytime with Stephan. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a story about a young man named Richard and his love for Rebecca. Richard and Rebecca met at a park one day when they were walking their animals, and they instantly clicked and just knew that things were great. The chemistry was just wonderful between them, and Richard asked Rebecca for her telephone number, and Rebecca gave Richard the phone number, and they went their separate ways. Now, Richard didn't know that Rebecca was just visiting and lived about 3 hours and 44 minutes away. So, Richard started talking to Rebecca, started texting her a couple times a day, and then started texting more and sending pictures and calling. And Rebecca reciprocated with the same. And they started to develop strong feelings for one another. So Rebecca would come home to the place where they met and stay for a couple months at a time, sometimes for holidays. And they started hanging out a lot more. They decided to start dating, and they fell in love. So then it was harder every time Rebecca had to leave Richard. And Rebecca would drive back home, and Richard would come visit Rebecca every couple weeks. And he hated driving, but he didn't mind driving because he loved her so much. So they would talk every night and text all day and video talk. And they were very, very in love. Now, Rebecca would get upset sometimes because Richard would ask Rebecca to send him pictures. And Richard would reply, "I can't help it. You're the only thing I want to look at." And Rebecca didn't understand. Rebecca didn't understand that Richard was always thinking about her all the time and always wanted to talk to her and see what she was up to and see her, and wish that he was 3 hours, 44 minutes away with Rebecca. So he just wanted the next best thing, and just to see her as much as he could. And Rebecca would get bothered by Richard's requests. But Richard didn't want to look at any other women. He didn't want to talk to other girls. He just wanted Rebecca's attention. So Rebecca heard him out, and Richard explained how much he loved her. And she was like, "Okay, I understand. I'm sorry. I know I'm a sexy woman, and I know I don't blame you for wanting to look at me." Richard said, "Thanks for understanding." So then Rebecca would start sending him pictures all the time, even when he didn't ask, and Richard was the happiest man alive. And then Richard and Rebecca planned 7 months in the future, and they decided, well, we're gonna basically be living together for 5 days out of the week, the weekdays, and then I'll stay with my parents on the weekends. And Rebecca said, "Yeah, that sounds great. That's exactly what we're gonna do." And Richard was like, "Okay, babe, if you insist. This can just be the first step to actually getting a place together. You just stay with me 5 days, and then you can stay with your parents 2 days." And Rebecca was like, "Yeah, I'd love to give you are you sure 5 days is okay? And Richard was like, yeah, 5 days is fine. You're welcome whenever you would like to stay. So then they adopted a cat, and Rebecca was highly allergic to cats, but Richard loved cats. And sometimes relationships are about sacrifice, and you can't just be selfish all the time with your body. And so Richard got a cat, and Rebecca was like, I'm very allergic. And Richard gave her Benadryl, and she was drowsy all the time. And then Richard was like, you're right, Rebecca. This isn't right for me to ask you. Rebecca's sending Richard images right now. We wonder what those are. And so they had to get rid of the cat and put him up for adoption, found a nice, loving little family for them to love Robert, the cat. So Richard and Rebecca just hung out with Dee, Rebecca's dog, and she was a shitty dog, but they loved her.